What's up, Tailgaters? My name is Tailgate Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we are going to be looking at conference championship clinching scenarios. What does that mean? It means we're going to look at the ways that different teams around conferences in the nation can clinch their spot in their conference championship games. There are a lot more than you would think. There's still a lot of chaos that can happen in this college football season. And honestly, it could get a lot of fun this weekend. We've already had some games played. It's Black Friday. It's around 12:30 Eastern time as of recording this. So just beware there are some games going on right now, but I'll make that known later. So, hey, let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? We're going to look at different ways that teams can clinch a spot in their conference championship game. If you end up liking this video, you want to see more, consider subscribing, leave a like, share the video, do anything you can. Please help support the channel. It means a lot to me. I want to try to grow this thing as big as possible, and definitely have gotten farther than I ever thought we would. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. There are 3 conference championship games that have already been decided. We're going to get Georgia and Alabama on December 4th in Atlanta, Georgia, for the SEC championship game. And this one should be a lot of fun. This was the matchup that everyone was expecting coming into this year, Georgia and Alabama. And it's going to have some high stakes. Saying that Georgia and Alabama both take care of business against their respective rivals, which I think both of them will, then this sets up a huge matchup because if Georgia is already in. So if Georgia wins, it just knocks Alabama out, possibly opens up a spot for a team like Notre Dame or Oklahoma State. But if Alabama wins, then they're going to be in the playoff as well. Probably will end up being the number 1 team. And so that is something interesting to watch there. We'll see what happens there in that game. Again, I'll predict all of these next week. Houston and Cincinnati, that's going to be your American Championship game, although it is not yet known where the host site will be. I have a feeling it's going to be Cincinnati because, again, the higher seeded team ends up hosting the conference championship. I have a feeling it is going to be Cincinnati. Cincinnati has East Carolina this afternoon as of recording this. And then, of course, Houston plays UConn tomorrow, which they should easily win that one. So, hey, if Cincinnati wins, then if Cincinnati wins tonight, or I should say this afternoon, then they host. But if Cincinnati loses and Houston takes care of business, then Houston will get to host. But also, if Cincinnati loses a game, they are done. They are out of playoff conversation. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. The host site, more likely than not, will end up being Cincinnati, Ohio. Cincinnati's playing good football at the right time. Probably should get the win this afternoon. And then the Sun Belt Championship game, no effect on the college football playoff, but it should be a pretty exciting game. It's a rematch of a game we saw earlier this year, Louisiana and App State. Again, in the regular season, Louisiana absolutely demolished App State. I mean, just ran them out of the building. It was bad. App State is going to hope to get their revenge. This one is going to be in Lafayette, Louisiana, as the host site for Louisiana. Should be a pretty entertaining game. Again, I'll preview and predict these next week. So let's go ahead now. There are some win and you're in scenarios in the group of 5. There are none in the Power 5, believe it or not. Well, there are, but it encompasses some other things with other divisions. So Conference USA and Mid-American have some win-or-go-home scenarios here. UTSA has already clinched a spot in Conference USA Championship, and they will face the winner of Western Kentucky and Marshall. Those 2 teams play this week, and I'm going to go ahead and predict Marshall. I believe Marshall's going to come out of there. Of course, UTSA, one of the 3 undefeated teams left in the nation, so that would be a very exciting game. I have a feeling no matter who they play, they've already played Western Kentucky this year, and it was a pretty good game in and of itself. So wouldn't mind a rematch there at all. Probably be just as good as the last one. And then for Marshall, don't believe these 2 teams have played yet this year. UTSA's got to take care of business against North Texas, but they've already clinched a spot in Conference USA. So we'll see. Maybe Marshall or maybe Western Kentucky can force a rematch, or will Marshall be able to get it done on their home field? That's what I think will happen, though. And then the Mid-American, you have Northern Illinois. They've had a terrific season so far. Again, UTSA has had a terrific season as well. But Northern Illinois This team has had a really good season for the expectations they had coming in, and they're going to get to face the winner of Miami, Ohio, and Kent State, two teams in the state of Ohio. That game is going to be at Ford Field in Detroit. Not sure where the Conference USA game is going to be quite yet. So if you want a prediction there for me, I think Kent State and Dustin Crum is going to find a way to get it done, move their way into the Mid-American Conference Championship game. And hey, that one should be a fun one. I cannot remember who Northern Illinois has played up to this point. But I'm pretty sure if they play Kent State, it's going to be a rematch. I'm almost positive about that. So, hey, I mean, no matter who comes in to play Northern Illinois at Ford Field in Detroit, should be a pretty fun game as well. But, yeah, so now stuff is going to start to get more complicated. We're going to move on with possibly the most complicated one, but it's also the only one in the group of 5 that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the Mountain West. So, how to clinch? We're going to start with the division. We're going to start with the San Diego State division because, well, that's just better. That's the Mountain West West. So, easy as this. If San Diego State beats Boise State, they are currently playing as we speak. Boise State is up 7-0, and San Diego State just got the ball across midfield, 14-yard pass to Lucas Bird to Jordan Bird, from Lucas Johnson. So San Diego State is driving. If San Diego State can come back and get this win over Boise State, they're in the Mountain West Championship game. But Fresno State, if San Diego State loses to Boise State, then Fresno State gets in over tiebreakers. So Fresno State took care of business yesterday afternoon against San Jose State. So we'll see what happens there in that one. But again, that division is as simple as that. Probably going to end up being San Diego State if they can take care of business here. They actually are now inside the red zone. You know what time I recorded this now, right? Well, I probably told you at the beginning. But Boise State, Utah State, and Air Force are all in vie for getting into the Mountain West Championship game from the Mountain Division. And we're going to start with Air Force. So look at the bottom there. Air Force, that's the AF. They can get in by way of a 3-way division tie. And that's because of other tiebreakers, because of these. If all 3 of these teams win this week or all 3 of these teams lose, then head-to-head is a wash because Boise State Air Force beat Boise State but lost to Utah State. And then Boise State has the tiebreaker over Utah State. So, yeah, the head-to-heads there are kind of a wash. We'll see that prevalent in the next conference we're going to talk about as well. You can probably guess what conference that is. But for the Mountain West, Air Force would need a 3-way division tie in order to get in just because of other tiebreakers and things like that. So we'll see what happens. But Air Force also has to take care of business in their game as well. But I didn't feel like it was necessary to put that because obviously they would have to win. But I put it for the others. We'll talk about Boise State next. They have to beat San Diego State, which, again, they are up 7-0 as of right now. And Air Force needs to lose because Air Force has the tiebreaker over Boise State. So there you go. And then for Utah State, you need to beat New Mexico, clear and easy. But you also need Boise State to lose because of the tiebreaker, right? So still some very interesting things to play out in the Mountain West Conference. I have a feeling it's going to be San Diego State. I think they're going to come back and beat Boise State. And then Utah State, I have a feeling, is going to get in there as well because Boise State would lose. Utah State probably going to end up beating New Mexico. So all Air Force can hope for is Utah State probably going to end up beating New Mexico. So you're rooting for Boise State, and you have to take care of business in your own game. So moving on now to the American. No, not the American. We just talked about them. That that conference already happened. The Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC. Pitt has already clinched a spot in the ACC championship game. Now let's look at the other division to where, well, there are still some interesting things that can go on in the ACC Atlantic because when you look at these 3 teams, the head-to-heads are all a wash. Wake Forest has beaten NC State NC State beat Clemson, and Clemson beat Wake Forest. So again, the head-to-heads, all a wash, all a wash. So if we end up with a three-way tie, it's not going to matter. But easiest scenario. Wake Forest is going to the ACC championship game as long as they beat Boston College. If they beat Boston College, they are in. Now, Boston College finds a way to beat them, then Wake Forest is going to need some help. We're going to jump down to Clemson right now because theirs is a little bit more simpler. They have to beat South Carolina to take care of business there, but then they need Wake and NC State to lose. They need Wake to lose because of the tiebreaker, and they also need NC State to lose because of a few reasons, but mainly because they have the tiebreaker over them. They have the same amount of conference losses. Clemson's conference schedule is done, so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But for NC State, they need to beat North Carolina, which is not going to be an easy task. But again, I've predicted them to do it. And then they need Wake to lose, simply for this reason. If they win and then Wake loses, it doesn't matter what Clemson does because they have the tiebreaker. But when you look, so let's say Clemson wins, Wake loses, and NC State wins. Okay, that creates a three-way division tie. And like we just saw with the Air Force Falcons, the head-to-heads would be a complete wash. And then you'd go to other tiebreakers, which favor NC State being, I believe, record in their own division. So that is definitely going to be something to watch for there. But NC State would get the tiebreakers. So we'll see what happens there in this one, but should still be very, very interesting to watch the race in the ACC. Again, it's as simple as Wake Forest, you win and you're in. NC State, Clemson need a little bit of help, but there are still paths for them to go play Pitt in Charlotte. Moving on now to the Big 12. And the Big 12 is pretty simple. Oklahoma State has clinched a spot in the Dr. Pepper Big 12 championship. Now, when you look, Oklahoma State play this week. But Oklahoma State has the head-to-head over Baylor. So even if they lose, they'd get in over Baylor, and then they would play Oklahoma. So really, Baylor is the one that doesn't control their own destiny. Because when you look here at Oklahoma, all they have to do is beat Oklahoma State, and then it would be a rematch of Bedlam exactly 1 week later in the Big 12 championship game. But for Baylor, they need to beat Texas Tech. They need to take care of business there. They'd move to 7-2 in conference, but they need Oklahoma State to beat Oklahoma. Even though they have the tiebreaker over Oklahoma, Oklahoma has a better conference record if they beat Oklahoma State by 1 win. But if Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, which I am predicting is going to happen, I think most of the nation, or I should say a majority of the nation is going to predict to happen. If Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, Baylor would get in because them and Oklahoma would have the same conference record, saying they take care of business against Texas Tech, and then they would end up going to the Big 12 championship game. But of course, if both Oklahoma and Baylor lose, then, well, it would be Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game anyway. So Baylor got to take care of business, beat Texas Tech, and you're rooting for Oklahoma State again in Bedlam that night. Of course, Baylor plays at 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and Baylor and Oklahoma State. That is the primetime game on ABC. So still some interesting things to watch there in the Big 12, but Oklahoma State, you are in the Big 12 championship game without any rebuttal, anything. Oklahoma State is in. They are going to Arlington. So let's move on now to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten can get a little complicated here as well. But when you look at the Big Ten East, hey, this division is very simple. You have the game this week, Ohio State, Michigan, a top 5 battle, and this game has some high stakes. Not only is it a playoff elimination game, it's also for the right to go to Indianapolis. Now, Ohio State playing really good football. They're playing their best football at the right time. Michigan pulled out a lot of tricks against Maryland, and we'll see if they have anything in store for Ohio State. But again, I've predicted the Buckeyes to win and move on to Indianapolis. But we'll see what happens tomorrow. That should be a very, very exciting game. I just think Ohio State is playing their best football at the right time. When you look at the Big Ten West, again, there are some straightforward scenarios here. If Wisconsin beats Minnesota tomorrow at 4:00 on Fox, then they will be in the Big Ten championship game. They will get to go back to Indianapolis. Most likely will end up playing Ohio State yet again. So yeah, even with all the chaos happening this year, you're probably still going to get Ohio State, Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. I know how crazy, but Wisconsin does have to go on the road. And if Wisconsin loses, that opens up the door for these other teams, especially Minnesota, who we're going to talk about next. Of course, you have to beat Wisconsin in order to get to Indianapolis, but you also need Iowa to lose and Purdue to win. You need Purdue to win because when you look at the Big Ten West, if you beat Wisconsin, you give Wisconsin another conference loss. And then if Iowa loses, that drops everyone in the division. As long as Purdue wins, it drops everyone in the division to 6-3. To 6-3. If Wisconsin and Iowa lose, of course, that means Minnesota gets a win, and then Purdue has to beat Indiana, in which case you have a 4-way tie for the Big Ten West. Head-to-heads wouldn't matter then as well. You go to other tiebreakers, and Minnesota would be the favorite in a lot of those other tiebreakers. So that's how Minnesota gets in. For Iowa, it's as simple as this. You have to beat Nebraska, and you need Minnesota to beat Wisconsin. Of course, Iowa and Nebraska play later this afternoon at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time on the Big Ten Network. That's going to be a fairly interesting game right there. But if you're Iowa, you got to take care of business. And then the next day, tomorrow, you will be huge Minnesota fans. So you can get to Indianapolis. So there are the scenarios for the Big Ten. Now, if Wisconsin wins, if Minnesota beats Wisconsin and then Iowa loses to Nebraska, but Purdue loses to Indiana, I believe it would be Wisconsin that still gets the nod to go to Indianapolis, although I'm not sure about that one. I know it wouldn't be Minnesota. It'd be Wisconsin or Iowa. And, of course, when you look at the head-to-head between Wisconsin and Iowa, it would be Wisconsin. So I believe if that scenario happens, Wisconsin were to go, but there's still a lot to play out. Now let's look at our final conference, and that is the conference we haven't talked about yet. That's the Pac-12. Yes, Washington State can still make the Pac-12 championship game. Utah, with that huge win over Oregon, not only knocked Oregon and the Pac-12 out of the college football playoff, but clinched Utah a spot in the Pac-12 championship game. Now, what do teams in the Pac-12 North have to do? Well, it's as simple as this for Oregon. You beat Oregon State, you are in the Pac-12 championship game, and you get your chance to avenge your loss against Utah. When you look at Oregon State, hey, pretty simple. You have to beat Oregon, and you're rooting for Washington State to lose the Apple Cup over Washington for reasons because Washington State has that head-to-head win over Oregon State, of course. And a tiebreaker scenario, if Oregon State beats Oregon and then Washington State wins. So here you go. Here's this scenario. If Washington State beats Washington, they also need Oregon to lose because that creates, again, another 3-way division tie. And a lot of the tiebreakers, because head-to-head would be a wash, right? Because Oregon beat Washington State beat Oregon State, and then in this scenario, Oregon State would beat Oregon. So Washington State needs a 3-way division tie, in which case tiebreakers would favor them because of their division record, right? Or other tiebreakers like that. So very, very interesting still. Again, we could see a lot of 3-way division ties, in which case there would be some talk going on. We could see a lot of big teams miss their conference championship game again. Wisconsin, Iowa. One of those teams is definitely going to miss it, but both of them can still miss. Oregon, they might not even make it to the Pac-12 championship game if they don't take care of business against Oregon State, because more likely than not, Washington State is that favorite over Washington, probably going to win that game as well. And so if you're Oregon, you got to beat Oregon State to make that championship game. Yeah, So those are all of the scenarios. If you guys have any questions, please leave it down in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have. If you want more predictions, please, if you didn't see a game on yesterday's video that you want to see me predict, leave it in this comment section. Leave it in that comment section. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. But that's going to do it. Tomorrow, you're going to get my Ohio State fan reaction over the Michigan game. And yeah, should be a whole lot of fun. So remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. I'll see all you guys tomorrow. Goodbye.